For eons, Kerbals have explored the stars and colonized them. Colonization became even more important during the death of Kerbal, the Kerbal's first star system. This did little to stop the Kerbal's dreams of interstellar conquest. After a short break from space travel, the Kerbals have had a resurgence and are ready to explore again. This is KSP Revival. So enough yapping, it's time to actually start the space travel. I'll be launching the Helium X and docking it with Nebulon, which you may recognize if you watched my cinematic entitled Project Nebulon. It's probably one of the greatest videos on this entire channel. The Helium X is a successor to the Helium SSTO, which is a very powerful and efficient single-stage-to-orbit spaceplane. It was a good spaceplane for most Kerbal-sized planets, but unfortunately it couldn't really do well with higher gravity, higher atmospheric density environments, so I had to make an upgrade. Well, I'm sure atmospheric density isn't the problem, because these air-breathing engines can work at basically all atmospheric pressures. Unless it's too thin. It's mostly gravity that's the issue. Now, one problem with Nebulon is that it's extremely laggy. Thankfully, I was able to isolate the issue to Blue Shift, which does provide me warp drives, so I won't be able to not use warp drives and not use Blue Shift. So it kind of gives me a dilemma. Do I have warp drives and deal with insane amounts of lag, or do I not use them, have good performance, but have to do everything manually? I do want to use some more typical ISVs just to avoid the lag Blue Shift gives me. But doing so might be a little bit harder because I will have to construct something massive. I will alter some configs manually to buff the engines I will be using because I have warp drives at this point. Who knows, maybe I'm using like some antimatter Graviolian augmented antimatter engine. It's like my head cannon. It gives me a head cannon reason to buff and boost the ISP of an engine. Another thing I did is I did cheat all the science tech nodes to be unlocked, because I was pretty close to unlocking all the technologies, except for a few stubborn tech nodes like some solar panels and bigger gravity rings. I kind of wanted this save to be more of a glorified sandbox now, so I feel like this isn't an issue. Another thing I will be doing is I'll be moving away from using Kerbal colonies, because at interstellar distances, having to ferry Kerbals between colonies is going to be pretty annoying. So I'll just use Kerbal constructs just to be able to launch spacecraft without having to transport any Kerbals or mine any resources. Mining resources isn't actually that big of a problem, unless the resources are kind of rare. It's mostly just ferrying Kerbals over. Now, I may be actually wondering, what star system am I exploring right now? This is the Jinzha system from Cosmic Serenity 3.0, which just released a couple days ago. Well, by the time this video uploads, it'll be like almost a week, but it's still a very new update. It's a K-type star that still is actually pretty young. It still has a protoplanetary disk. There's actually a planet in that disk that I will explore later this series, but not this episode. I'll be exploring two planets today. First one is Jinzha, which is a tidally locked magma world, with lots of interesting surface features that I'll get to later. And the second one, probably the most interesting planet in this entire star system, Hundun, which is a planet that time forgot. It has dinosaurs, a slightly thicker atmosphere than Kerbal or Sanctar. Because I am playing with Celestial Harmony, so I will not be launching from Kerbal, I will be launching from Sanctar, which is the Kerbal's homeworld's billions of years in the future. I may not notice it, whenever I'm outside of Time Warp, the game is extremely laggy for me. I have no idea why exactly, but I do know it has something to do with the Blue Shift, because when I remove certain parts having to do with Blue Shift, the lag just goes away. So I cut out a whole lot of the interplanetary transfer because getting to Jinzha, because it's super close to the star, Yangshao. I have a whole lot of relative velocity I had to kill off. It was just annoying, so I cut it all out. You may have some weird glowing spots on the surface of Jinzha, and those aren't cities. They're actually glowing deposits of uranium. So if you actually want to go down there and get a bunch of fission fuel, it's actually a really good place. It's a high-risk, high-reward system. Now, I will be using the same lander I used for Project Nebulon, because I didn't bother undocking it, but for that reason, I will be using the wrong flag anytime I use this landing. Instead of being the normal Nova Aerospace flag, I will be using the Project Nebulon flag. I don't really mind that, but it's just mildly annoying. The other detail about this planet is that I actually think it's tightly locked, because it looks like an eyeball. The part that faces Jinzha all the time ends up burning and melting into magma, while the part that's away from it is just all solid rock. I'll be landing somewhere close to the eye, but not so close that the Kerbals will overheat and explode. Just kind of get pretty close to where it's hot, but not too hot. Thankfully, I don't actually need any radiators on this lander. It seems to be just fine on its own. And this landing was incredibly scuffed. I just couldn't figure it out. I landed, tipped over, and then I decided to go for it again. But unfortunately, my horizontal velocity was too high on all the landings, and I just kept tipping over. So I had to keep on trying over and over again. Oh boy, this is the most Kerbal landing ever. Till eventually I actually got the landing right and didn't tip over, and nothing exploded, and nobody died, and it all went well. It's a weird issue. For some reason, I'm actually sinking somewhat deep into the ground. I'm not sure if the parallax ground collisions are messing something up. I'm not sure how the Kerbals feel about sinking to the ground. Maybe it's just a bunch of sand, it's like quicksand, and they're all falling into it. But then again, I doubt there'll be quicksand on somewhere this hot, because all the water will evaporate. Maybe it's the radiation or the heat making the Kerbals hallucinate. Because the ground is kind of moving and shifting every time I move the camera. I believe it's just another glitch with parallax. One thing I do like about this lander is that it actually has airlocks really close to the ground. I put those there so I won't have to climb up a really long ladder on a high-gravity world. Because this lander is made for extremely high-gravity environments, which will prove to be very useful, especially later in this mission. I'm not sure if any of the planets in the Jinzha system have thick, high-gravity vacuum worlds, but some of the other solar systems added by Cosmic Serenity 3.0, such as the Atlas system, all the planets in that system have like extremely high gravity or extremely high atmospheric density. Like there's one planet in the Atlas system, I believe it's called Erebus if I recall correctly. It has 95 atmospheres of pressure. That seems like a whole lot, but I actually tested the Helium X there, and it actually was able to take off, but it only reached around 35 meters per second before drag made it stop moving. And it just kept spinning around, too. Like, usually physics warp, if you use it in a thick atmosphere, it causes a bunch of aerodynamic instability and can tear your spacecraft apart. You don't even need physics warp. So when I actually get around to visiting the Atlas system, that's definitely something I'll have to deal with. But it makes for a really fun challenge. One thing I also like about Nebulon and all of its accessory spacecraft is that they all use the same fuel, which is hydrogen. There's one giant hydrogen tank on the Nebulon. It's getting somewhat low, but thankfully I can refuel this around the gas giant because I did pack some exosphere scoops on it. And with mods like a TAC fuel balancer, I can easily transfer the fuel to any parts I want and make sure it stays in the necessary parts. Now, if you're using Blue Shift for warp drives, here's a cool little tip of advice. It's always best to try to cancel out as much relative velocity as possible before you actually enter the sphere of influence of another body. So you want to get pretty close with your warp drive, and then cancel out any relative velocity, because the warp drive doesn't actually do that. It just takes you there, but maintains your velocity. Blue Shift also does come with an automatic circularization helper, but I have disabled that because I actually want to do things manually. I've actually cancelled a whole lot of my relative velocity. It's only 600 meters per second at this point. So now I gotta make sure I have a nice direction so I can actually get into a circular orbit with my warp drive. This vessel is somewhat hard to turn, especially when it's super laggy, so it does take a little while to get a trajectory that I'm satisfied with. Thankfully, the plasma RCS from the latest version of Far Future Technologies is very useful. It provides a decent amount of thrust at extreme efficiencies, something you'd see in, like, say, plasma engines from near future propulsion. Unfortunately, I kind of went overkill on the warp drive and ended up screaming right past Hundun. I did disable the planetary handbrake, which limits your speed while in the sphere of influence of a planetary body, such as Kerbal or Duna, or in this case Hundun from Cosmic Serenity. Thankfully, I am easily able to get into an orbit, but it was a retrograde orbit, so I had to burn a little extra to make sure it was a prograde orbit. Now, Hundun has 2 moons. I won't explore them this episode, but I'll certainly explore them in the next one. I forgot their names, but one of them's a pancake asteroid shepherd moon, and the other has a... It's a vacuum world, but it's a hazy one, so it looks like it has an atmosphere even though it doesn't. It has a lot of lava on its surface. I forgot their names, but I'll certainly remember them when I actually edit and upload the video about them. I really wish there was a way to like completely disable a warp drive part on the Gebulon, because I feel like Blue Shift is causing these issues. I feel like if there's a way to like disable all the calculations that Blue Shift is doing, I feel like it's solve the lag unless I actually want to use the warp drive. I think it is Blue Shift that's causing the issues, because when I tested a spacecraft to replace Nebulon that was supposed to be lag-proof, it was super laggy, but then I removed all the Blue Shift parts and it didn't lag. Like, it basically doubled and tripled my frames per second. Another weird thing that happened, I think me cheating in completion of this tech tree did this. For some reason, all the planetary scans are completed. I mean, I could do them myself with Nebulon, because I did put survey scanners on this thing. For some reason, they're already all completed. So, that's kind of convenient, but also kind of cheaty, but to be honest, I don't really care that much. The other thing about Hundun that's pretty cool is that it has a whole lot of active volcanoes. If you find a big, thick plume of grayish-black smoke, it's probably because of a volcano. Now, Hundun is very interesting because it has some things that have actually never been seen in Kerbal Space Program modding history. It actually has moving, living, breathing dinosaurs. There's only 2 of them at the moment, but I actually plan to explore them and actually look at the dinosaurs on Hundun later this episode. Before I do that, I actually have to land this and actually perform the whole re-entry thing. There's also a volcano in the background. There's actually quite a few volcanoes on Hundun, so it's pretty cool to actually fly by them. Another cool thing about the Helium X is that it actually has VTOL capabilities. I did make a couple of tweaks because for some reason the center of thrust was a bit off, but now it's actually very stable and very fun to fly in VTOL mode. The VTOL engines can also act as a booster to help the atmospheric engines work. During this descent, you may notice a few cuts because I actually had to revert back to previous points and load some quick saves because I kept crashing. I mean, I didn't really crash that hard. The only thing that happens is that the back vacuum engines kept exploding because those things have the impact tolerance of a paperclip. I could just breathe and look at them the wrong way and they explode by colliding into the terrain. It's super annoying. The Helium X isn't actually that hard to fly and land using the VTOL engines because you just gotta make sure your horizontal velocity isn't that high. You may have to do some rather awkward maneuvers to make sure your horizontal velocity is zeroed out or as close to zero as possible. But it's possible, I'm sure. Because if it wasn't possible, I wouldn't be able to land this normally with VTOL engines. Using scientific experiments aren't really necessary when I maxed out the tech tree, but I still want to do science every so often just to get some science points. To actually land using VTOL, a good way to zero out your horizontal speed is to fly around in circles. Or just do what I did and like get very close to a tree. I don't think I have parallax scatters enabled, so parallax scatter collisions enabled. So if I hit something, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world, but I just want to make sure that I don't actually explode or anything. I will also move the Healing X to a less grassy spot. I may notice a high amount of bones on the ground. If there are bones, certainly something must have died there. But what? What died there? I don't see anything living. Is there like a mass extinction event here or something? I don't see any asteroids, but there are plenty of volcanoes. Who knows, maybe the dinosaurs all died and we are what's left. At first, I thought dinosaurs were just randomly spawning, similar to parallax scatters, but there actually are only 2 dinosaurs, and they're actually in pre-programmed locations that are findable with KerbNet. A KerbNet is, I would say, is a kind of an overlooked feature in stock Kerbal space program, but it's really a nice tool that allows you to map out planets and find Easter eggs. Though I don't really like how it works because for some reason only certain parts have a certain chance of finding Easter eggs. So what I did was I basically cheated and made the Easter egg percentage 100%. I feel like I should make a patch that like makes it 100% for all the parts, because there are other mods like ScanSat that can always find them with complete certainty. I do not have a ScanSat on this save, but I do have it in KSP Wayfinders, which is my other series I have going on right now. I really did enjoy having a nice leisure flight through the entirety of, well, not the entirety, but a whole lot of Hundun. I certainly hope I'm not mispronouncing that. These atmospheric engines can easily propel the Helium X to decent velocities on their own, but if you want to go supersonic or really fast to orbital speeds, you need the help of the vacuum engines, which, despite being called vacuum engines, can actually work perfectly fine in an atmosphere. I just only use them in a vacuum because that's only where I actually need them. The Helium X, I did upscale those engines from more from the Helium model, so they do provide a bit more TWR on their own. So for that reason, I am able to use them and rely on them a bit more. Now, I flew around for a bit more and still didn't find any dinosaurs. This was still before I actually knew how to find them. So I decided to stop for a break and actually come to Nebulon and do a bit of a research scan. Now, as I previously said, all the survey scans were already maxed out, but I wanted to see where they were using KerbNet, so to do that, I had to get into a polar orbit. Now, before I did that, I actually found the dinosaur just from the equatorial orbit where I already was, but I couldn't find the second one, so I decided to get into a polar orbit to make sure I covered the entirety of the surface of Hundun. And I actually was able to find the second dinosaur. So if you have KerbNet, you can find a question mark, and those are your Easter eggs. There are these waypoints, you can actually fly to them in order to find my dinosaurs. Now, this flight will actually take a little bit long. I actually was worried that I keep running out of fuel because I have to use these engines quite a lot in order to get to speed. But once I am like past Mach 2, these atmospheric engines can actually propel me to almost orbital velocity. It only needs a small kick from the vacuum engines to actually finish getting to orbit. These jet engines from OPT Legacy actually do have a closed cycle mode, but they're like extremely inefficient. So it's just better to use the engines from Impulse Party instead, because those engines have a lot better efficiency. In fact, they're actually similar to some fusion engines from far future technologies. They're really great for interplanetary travel and really heavy vacuum landers. They're not actually fusion engines. I mean, they are labeled as fusion engines, they just require a high amount of electric charge, and that can come from anything. It can come from a nuclear reactor, or it could come from a chemically powered Stirling Systems fuel cell, which is what I'm using in this case. So my headcanon says they're overclocked magnetoplasmodynamic engines, similar to the ones from near-future propulsion, except they have higher ISP, higher thrust, and can work in the atmosphere. Not really scientifically accurate, but they're still very powerful engines. And this is going to be our very first dinosaur. If I recall correctly, his name is Oscar. If that's right, these dinosaurs actually have names. It's really important I be as quiet as possible, because it seems like Oscar is taking a nap right now. There are some parts during this landing I actually was afraid I was going to crash. Thankfully I was able to do this landing first try. Maybe slightly hovering off the ground, but it's certainly not an issue. He's probably just forgotten how gravity works during his nap and just decided to start levitating. If you look closely, he's actually moving. This is actually a first in Kerbal Space Program, because most Easter eggs in Kerbal Space Program don't actually move, they just stay completely still. These dinosaurs still do remain stationary, but they are animated, and that is definitely a really great feature of Cosmic Serenity 3.0. I'm not gonna get the entire crew out because I've already gotten a full-on EVA. Besides, I want to let Oscar enjoy his nap. I am in a new biome, so I will collect some new science experiments, and take a couple of pictures of the dinosaur.
To a suborbital hop, but I want to save as much fuel as possible. These jet engines can actually run indefinitely in the atmosphere, so that is why the Helium X is able to travel as far as it can.
The great thing about flying over the North Pole of a planet is that you see everything around you, like the accretion disk of Young Chao, the stars, all the moons, from a completely different angle. In fact, in this one spot in the North Pole, you can actually see both of Hundun's moons. It's a really beautiful screenshot opportunity, I must say. The other weird thing about flying over the North Pole is that your camera angle changes automatically as you travel from going south to going north to going south, and vice versa, of course. It's just how the automatic Kerbal Space Program camera works. Unfortunately, now that I'm on the other side of the planet, it's also nighttime, so that'll make finding a dinosaur a whole lot harder. My original plan was to land somewhere else, wait until day, and then find the dinosaur, but it just so happened that where I decided to land was where the dinosaur was all along. Still will be a little bit longer before we actually do land. We're getting very close to our landing spot. So at this point, I actually noticed a weird object, which actually turned out to be the dinosaur, so I decided to come down closer for an investigation. Switching to VTOL mode allows him to easily land and survey areas. Behind the tree is not Oscar, Oscar's the other one, is Gregory the Dinosaur. It's kind of dark so you can't really see him, but I will time warp to the day so you get a bigger view. Take a look! Another dinosaur! This one's having a snack, seeing a tree right now. This is Gregory the Dinosaur. Unlike Oscar, who's constantly sleeping, this guy's constantly eating from a tree. It's really breathtaking how some things in Kerbal Space Program can actually move around. Like, previously, like, the best statics would just sit there, do nothing. Now we actually have dinosaurs sleeping, breathing, moving their legs, and this guy is eating from a tree. I must say, Kerbal Space Program planet packs have come a long way since Copernicus first came out. Now, if at this point I decide I've explored enough of Hundun, it's actually time to return to orbit. Before I actually return to orbit, I'm going to fly close to the equator so I can end up in a nice equatorial orbit. Though I can't figure out which way was south for a little bit, so I think I have to waste a bit of fuel turning around. Like previous flights, I only use the atmospheric engines for atmospheric travel. Just doing a little bit of a hop and a skip in the atmosphere. Eventually I start to slow down when I approach the equator. Then with the help of the VTOL engines, I change my direction to go 90 degrees. And then I want to speed up, I start using the vacuum engines. Eventually those are all you can use because the atmosphere gets too thin for me to use the atmosphere engines. Now, our mothership, Nebulon, is still on a polar trajectory, so with the power of editing, I can skip through all the rendezvous fluff and just skip straight to docking. May not seem that bad for the actual video, but the lag here is really just borderline unplayable. Thankfully, I can just speed everything up to 300%, and it looks a lot better. I also use this opportunity to recharge the fuel cells. Now that is going to be the first leg of this entire Grand Tour complete. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this, and I'll see you all in the next episode of KSP Revival.